Well, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Beyond the Box Score here, advanced stats from simple people as we welcome you to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Adam Azer here with amateur botanist Jacob Gibbs. Jacob, seems like new plants every time we see you on Monday afternoon.
Yeah, it's kind of a running joke with the Beyond the Box Score listener. Somebody even said, like, you should have a new plant every single podcast. So I kind of have just been rotating them in, just keep everybody on their toes.
It's pretty, it looks really peaceful in there.
Very impressive. I think it's cool that Jacob's doing it, and I don't think this is something you or I could do, Adam, for a multitude of reasons. Now, I will say this. I'm still waiting to see one specific plant on that desk.
Oh, geez, Dan, come on. Really? Why would he have a cactus? He doesn't live in
There
Arizona.
we go. That's what I was talking about.
It's got some cacti.
Oh, he does have cacti back there. Excuse me. Okay, from his Arizona days. All right, so we start with the Bengals and the Giants, 17-7 Cincinnati. A lot of stats to talk about in this game. We will talk about our four big topics, which are someone asked, why does Brandon Aiyuk hate me? So I actually reached out to him, and so we'll answer that question. The Cowboys, they're going into their bye. Can they improve? Will they improve? The Bucs running back situation, and one that I'm actually pretty excited to talk about here, even though it's fairly early in the season. We're starting to get a little bit of a sense of what's a good matchup, what's a bad matchup, and which teams now have the best playoff schedules. And not everything we say is going to be accurate. Things are going to change a lot in 10 weeks. But we can maybe give you some useful advice. I would just tell you right now, the Philadelphia Eagles, I mean, this upcoming week at the Giants might be, they have Pittsburgh later, but it might be their toughest matchup of the season. The Eagles have an amazing schedule for Jalen Hurts. 9 of his last 11 matchups are against teams that are currently bottom 10 against quarterbacks in terms of fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. So hopefully they can get it going. But this actually might be a tough week because Giants defense hasn't been that bad. And that's where we'll start. Dan, how you feeling? You were at the game. You were up late doing a Big Blue Banter podcast. And obviously you're pissed off that the Giants lost 17-7. But what were your takeaways from your vantage point at MetLife Stadium?
Yeah, I'm on like 2.5 hours of sleep today, which is never great. But I will say this. I had the perfect vantage point. I think the best seat in the house for all football games, I'll go to war with this take, is 300 tier. Yeah, you heard me right. 300 tier. First row of 300 tier, 50-yard line. Because that's how you watch the all 22 angle of football games being at the football game. You see everything. Post-snap safety rotations. Anything you could want. And my takeaway is this. The Giants defense played a very heroic performance in this game. This, I believe, on tape, I'll confirm it when I watch the rest of the tape, will be the best defensive performance they've had since the Seattle game in 2020 when they broke Russell Wilson. And I think this is better adjusted to the opponent. The Bengals were number 1 in EPA. They got Burrow rattled early. Burrow looked rattled. The pressure was there all game, 4 sacks. And this was despite being on the field over and over and over again because on the flip side of the ball, the Giants offense couldn't do anything. Now, we have so many of these games in our lifetime now, Adam, where Daniel Jones just looks rattled early. And then he can't throw a football accurately for a full game. He had an intended air yards last night, Daniel Jones, of 2.2 air yards, a career low for Daniel Jones, and a disgusting number that's so despicable. And you ask yourself why. And the reason why is early, when he threw 3 or 4 deep throws, the Wan'Dale Robinson, the Slayton, the Hyatt, they were 4 to 5 yards off target, nowhere near the intended receiver. So if you're Brian Daboll and you're watching an opposing defense do what the Bengals did, which is put all 11 guys 10 to 12 yards off the line of scrimmage. They didn't even play a deep safety. They didn't even play 1 or 2 deep safeties. You still can't throw deep because you don't trust your quarterback to be anywhere near accurate because he was rattled. And when he's rattled, he has games like that. He's now 1-14 in primetime and can single-handedly, in my opinion, lost them that game. I will be willing to say that despite the O-line not playing well and some other issues, when your quarterback plays that poorly, you can't win. And that's my rant. I'm done with it. I'm sorry to do it. This is Beyond the Box Score, but it had to be said.
The life of a Giants fan. You ask yourself why. That
more importantly is that Andrew Thomas, their left tackle, is having an MRI on his foot. And if he misses time, it is huge, absolutely huge, because we've talked about the Giants having a solid offensive line this year, and they're running a lot of plays and are doing things that are good for offense, and they've been somewhat surprising. Remember, they haven't had Neighbors the last 2 games. But this is my question for you guys. If Andrew Thomas has an extended absence, misses a few weeks, is Malik Neighbors, who also, by the way, has an amazing schedule. I'll just tell you that right now. Malik Neighbors, 8 of his last 10 opponents ranked 21st or worse against wide receivers. But if Andrew Thomas is out, is that bad news, Jacob? Do you think that's going to hurt Malik Neighbors?
I do think so. Unless we see them get Neighbors involved more with like the layup type targets, like more slot work and stuff, because he's working down the field a lot, and it just takes some time for some of those routes to develop.
That's a great point, and I hope they do move Neighbors a little bit more into the slot. The issue being they can't really do it because Wan'Dale Robinson operates that role, and they don't trust Hyatt, and for good reason. He had another he struggled a bit last night on the outside, so I do think Neighbors will still have that outside role, and hopefully they'll have the time to connect with him on those. But Josh Azudu, I think, would be the next man up, Adam, not Evan Neal, which is crazy to think about, and that's a disaster because Josh Azudu, they're trying to make him an offensive tackle, but every time he's gotten that opportunity, he's been like disaster league worse. So yeah, it could be bad for Neighbors.
When they didn't have Thomas last year, it was laughable. It was like, what the heck is going on right now? So it's a big deal. He's an all-pro left tackle. And really, I mean, you could argue he's the most important player on the Giants offense. Now on the Bengals side, and then Tyrone Tracy, guys, I mean, we'll see. I was hoping for a better performance. It's quite frankly, I thought he looked better than the numbers. I thought
much better than the numbers. Didn't he have over 100 total yards and a touchdown?
Oh, he had a lot. He had 17 carries for 50 yards and a touchdown, 6 catches for 57 yards. Obviously, he's good in the passing game, but the yards per carry is terrible. I was hoping that he was going to be better so that he could really take the role from Devin Singletary, but
he deserves to have taken the role. I'm going to say this from watching the tape and seeing it live. He played much better than those stats in the rushing game. He made a lot of plays that should have been blown up for nothing. And I'll tell you why. The Bengals, like I mentioned earlier, played all 11 defenders within 10 to 12 yards of the line of scrimmage, drove on all quick game and drove on all run plays. So that made it really difficult for Singletary or Tracy or anyone who would have been back there. Some of those runs he had on 3rd and 4th downs, they were all him finding the right hole, creating yards after contact. I actually thought Tracy looked phenomenal last night, especially considering the passing game. I'm at the point where I don't believe that he should be benched for Singletary. I think he should be the starter moving forward.
I agree. I don't know if it'll happen, but I agree. Jacob, on the Bengals side of things, it was a kind of a disappointing night, but maybe people underestimate the Giants defense. It's really not that bad. Burrow with 19.8 fantasy points per game. He is a top 5 quarterback per game. Did I say 19.8 fantasy? I'm sorry. He had 19.8 fantasy points last night in 6-point per pass and touchdown leagues, but he didn't throw a touchdown pass. So same in 4-point. He's top 5 per game, but he's had 2 huge games against Baltimore and Carolina and Washington, I think. And yeah, and he hasn't been above 21.2 points in any of his other 6 games. Everything looks great. I mean, his completion percentage, his QBR, his passer rating, he on paper looks like one of the best quarterbacks in football. I don't know if there's anything like, is he basically just what he is on paper, a top 5 quarterback per game, or do you see any worrisome signs? Because it's 4 of 6 weeks where he's been underwhelming.
Mm-hmm. I think it's basically what we have on paper. They throw so much for fantasy. I think he's basically in that range. I do think people sleep on the Giants defense. 4 sacks in this game, a lot of pressure, and that's been a consistent thing for them all year. For the Bengals, I don't have a whole lot. T. Higgins out-targeted Jamar Chase for the 3rd straight game, which is interesting. And then the big note for the Bengals for fantasy purposes is Chase Brown. Moss didn't get banged up in the game or anything, right?
No, he fumbled, and that was it. He was going back to the fumble.
Yeah, so
his last touch.
Chase Brown ran more routes than him for the first time ever. 52% route participation.
Nice.
Had more carries than him. So yeah, that's really exciting for him.
Yeah, great news. I'll give you the first half stats though, because they're not quite as encouraging. I mean, I don't know if I have those stats exactly, but it was basically the same. Oh yeah, first half stats. Zach Moss. Brown had 1 more touch, but Moss played 4 more snaps. He played 7 of 8 snaps on 3rd down. The only time he really played after the fumble was on 3rd down, Zach Moss. So we'll see if they go. And then Chase Brown fumbled himself. He fumbled. Right. He almost blew the game. Maybe I don't think the Giants would have scored, but they both fumbled. But Moss's fumble was huge, and that was a. I think we all see it. As much as I'm a Zach Moss guy, I have a lot of teams. I wish I could change that now because we all see it that Chase Brown needs more snaps, needs more touches. He's just running the ball so much better than Zach Moss.
I actually have one more note on the Bengals. We have to mention our guy Eric All, just kind of track him throughout the season. He had only 1 fewer route than Gesicki. Gesicki didn't have a target. So, I think he's slowly getting there.
And one note on what Jacob mentioned regarding Jamar Chase, T. Higgins target share. I don't have the numbers in front of me, just eye test based on watching the tape. The Giants' game plan was to put their number 2 corner on Chase and roll double to him the entire game. So it was a Belichickian game plan from Shane Bowen. And I think we'll probably see that a decent amount this year where some DCs just say, you know what, we'll leave Higgins one-on-one with our number 1 guy, use our number 2 corner on Chase, but always roll the safety over the top and double team him every play.
Yeah, Chase right now is the number 3 receiver per game in non-PPR, number 6 in full PPR. But man, like his target per route run rate is 19.4%. That is not what you think of from what's a career low, and it's not what you expect from an alpha wide receiver. 22% target share in the last 4 games since T. Higgins is back. Higgins has 6 more targets than Chase. Chase has 1 game with more than 7 targets. Again, should we just look at Jacob? He's a top 6 receiver in full PPR per game, number 3 in non-PPR. Just look at that and say that's what Jamar Chase is? Or are there some concerning signs sort of under the hood here?
His first read target rate has just been steadily dropping for like 3 years now. That was something we talked about last week with the fantasy points data team, is that we're going to talk about Brandon Aiyuk too, so this might be a good segue. These receivers who like held out, it's maybe just taking a while, or maybe it's just going to be the case all year where they're not as incorporated as like the clear cut, like first read as often. And that's definitely affecting both Chase and Aiyuk.
That's interesting. I didn't really think about that. I like that line of thinking. Like, is it just, they weren't really involved in the preseason. They weren't involved in training camp, and it's going to take them time to get them involved as more first reads.
There's another guy. I mean, he had 14 targets last week, so it's probably not the same, but going into week 6, CD Lamb.
Yeah.
No, he was the other one. Yeah.
Targets were really low for him, and we will talk about the Cowboys offense in a little bit. Yeah. Dan wasn't happy with what he saw from the Cowboys offense.
No, wasn't happy. The total opposite. What do you mean? It's the only joy I can get.
Oh, well, as a Giants fan, you were. As an analyst, you were not so happy with what you saw from the Cowboys offense. Beyond the box score, you guys record on Thursday, another episode there with really great in-depth analysis and fantastic guests from around the industry. The newsletter, you need to subscribe to that, cbssports.com/newsletter. Check it. Just get the Fantasy Football Today newsletter. Jacob writes it, and it's a great, great resource, especially, I think, for setting your lineup. You get these really detailed matchup breakdowns that, unfortunately, I would say you don't get on the podcast. I wish we could. I'll try to incorporate more of that from Jacob's newsletter, but you could just get it right to your inbox. We're going to take a break. Got an update on Tua Tagovailoa when we come back, and some advanced stats and much more after this.
Welcome to JJ's.
I'll have a... Wait, there's no way I can get a burger?
No chance. But you can have the NFL on CBS streams live on Paramount+. Oh, hang on. There's a toy.
Okay, let's talk about the news and notes. I'm not going to go through everything because I did yesterday. So Mike McDaniel, he expects Tua back this season, but he didn't say when. So that
I told you were jumping the gun on that week 7 thing, Adam.
Oh, he didn't say it's not going to be week 7. I think he said there's some testing I think they're doing this week. So hopefully we get another update. But I cannot acquire Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle or Achane expecting Tua back next week in week 8. Cannot do it. So just be aware. Running back news, Travis Etienne is week to week. Great opportunity for Bigsby if they can stay competitive with the Patriots. And they have been horrible against running backs. So we'll see where we start him. We'll see where we have him in the rankings. Tank Bigsby. Wide receiver, Dontavian Wicks is week to week. I don't think that we have long-term injuries here. I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to look at the snap shares. What was, do you guys know Mike Evans' snap share?
He got banged up a little and came back.
Yeah, I think it was on the low end. I'll tell you right now. Mike Evans played only 57% of the snaps.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I think he got banged up early, I think. Came back.
Yeah. Hopefully he's going to be okay. We know Aiden Hutchinson is almost certainly out for the year. Maybe he can come back for the Super Bowl, but he had surgery today. Yes, it did suck. They also lost defensive tackle Kyle Pico, who's a rotational defensive tackle, and Carlton Davis left with getting hit in the head, evaluated for a concussion. So rough day for the Lions, even with a amazing victory. And now they're at Minnesota next week, the undefeated Vikings. Jets edge rusher Hassan Reddick. Hopefully he's close to coming back. He hired a new agent. agents, Drew Rosenhaus and Ryan Matha. I hope I'm saying that name right. So it's possible the Jets could get a big piece of their defense. I don't want to say back. He hasn't played for them, but on the team. The Cardinals face the Chargers in week 7, and the Cardinals are a team, and I don't know the severity of the injuries, but they lost 4 defensive players yesterday in a loss at the Packers. A safety, a defensive tackle, a linebacker, and a defensive back, and it's a cornerback, all left with injuries. Again,
that roster was already so super short from a talent standpoint on defense.
Yeah. Patrick Surtain left with a concussion almost immediately, and Thursday game at New Orleans. It's hard to see him playing in that one. Houston linebacker Azeez Al-Shire left. Cornerback Darius Slay for the Eagles. He left with an injury. If you have not signed up yet for BetMGM, now is the time. Let's do it and use the bonus code FANTASY, and you're going to get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. And here's how it works. You download the BetMGM app, and you sign up using the bonus code FANTASY. Deposit at least $10. That's it, just $10. Place your first wager on any game, and you're going to receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use the bonus code FANTASY when you sign up. Jacob, you are up. Let's get some advanced stats. What do we got this week?
All righty. So, yeah, we already talked about Tyrone Tracy, but I did just want to point out how insane the role was. He had a 72% route participation. That's up from 41% last week. He had more pass blocking snaps than Eric Gray as well. So, like, after last week, I was like, somebody asked me, like, going into the week, is Tracy even the guy who'll be on the field if the Giants find themselves at a like large deficit? And I really didn't feel any confidence that he would, but now it's clear that he can play like all 3 downs. And that is really, really exciting. Like he had the highest snap rate and highest route participation rate of any running back in week 6.
Wow.
Which is just, for like a relatively inexperienced running back. I know he played in high school, but like over the past 5 or 6 years, he has like less than 200 rushes. That's pretty impressive to see an NFL team trust him with that type of a role.
Yeah.
Drake Maye. I was really encouraged by the results. This was statistically the best performance against Houston's defense this year. Wow. I wasn't expecting anything from as a passer, honestly. There's still some underlying things that are concerning. Like he took 4 sacks. His average time to throw was over 3 seconds, 3.06. And so that him and Jaden Daniels both that was something I was really concerned about them coming in, is like they are really appealing fantasy options because they scramble a lot and they have big arms and can deliver downfield throws pretty accurately. But the sacks are drive killers. It hasn't been a huge problem for Jaden, but he also, just because he's been so spectacular as a passer, he's made up for it. I don't know if you can expect that from Maye necessarily. So that's something to monitor going forward because obviously the offensive line is a problem. Did you guys get to watch any of them yet? I haven't got to go back.
Oh,
that's one I really want to watch that I haven't had a chance to yet.
That's exactly the number one on my list. I want to watch Drake.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
It'll happen though, because I was a big time Maye fan coming out.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
So,
you were like obnoxious about it.
Yeah, I think you saw some of the flashes from him.
Well, he's awesome, and he's like kind of divisive. Like some people,
right,
yeah. So
because he still has a long way to go. He's a raw prospect, as I always said. But I like to bet on guys with that kind of arm talent, that kind of size, that kind of frame, that kind of movement, and that kind of ability to create natural plays. And that's the biggest difference I see with some of these good and bad quarterbacks. Like, can you do what's on script and lock onto your first reader? Can you actually do things off script? And that doesn't just mean out of the pocket. It sometimes just means someone's open that's not in the progression. Can you recognize that he's open and get him the ball? That's something I saw Maye do on tape.
Yeah, for sure. Bucky Irving, just really, really impressive stuff. Obviously, his backfield mate, Sean Tucker, was also awesome. Ended up with 34 fantasy points. A lot of that did come in the second half, but both players were phenomenal. Bucky didn't have quite as many running lanes, but he did make some really big plays. He had a 65% route participation, which is really, really good for a rookie. That was second to only Tyrone Tracy. And in the first half, let me pull this up. Come on, True Media.
While you pull it up, I will say this. It's fun for me to see some of my takes from last year, like taking these long loading takes like Tank Bigsby, who I loved last year, and he was bad last year. And Sean Tucker was another one whose tape was really fun to watch at Syracuse. And he just didn't look like that guy at all last year when he was given the opportunity. And he looked like that guy yesterday at Syracuse. He was decisive with his running. He was explosive. He's a compact runner. I think he's got talent for sure. And I'm very interested to see how that running back room shakes out once White comes back healthy.
I tweeted out videos of all the runs for both guys, and they're both just so fun to watch. Sean Tucker's feet are literally like always moving. Like he's really, really cool. But
hey, Dan, where did he go to college, Sean Tucker?
Thought he went to Syracuse, unless I was mistaken.
It's not SERR
great.
CUSD. It's just a weird way to pronounce
Syracuse. How do you pronounce Syracuse?
Syracuse.
What?
How would you pronounce? How do you pronounce? What do you pour on your pancakes?
You pronounce it Syracuse, like a syrup?
Well, yeah, well, that's how it's spelled, dude. What do you put on your pancakes?
Everyone I've ever heard it pronounce it as Syracuse.
That's just the wrong pronunciation.
I can't even confirm that I've actually even ever heard that, but I've always pronounced it as Syracuse. I've never heard Syracuse.
I don't know. I mean, that's I just go by phonetically here, you know.
I don't know if you're right either. I'm seeing a bunch of Dan is rights in the chat. And you know what? I even saw a couple chats that I didn't put this one up earlier, Adam, and I could have, and now I might. Now I will.
Oh yeah, well,
yeah, I'll hang you to dry on this one. I wasn't going to.
First of all, you said one person says that you got it right, and you're like, "Oh,
no." Here's another. Adam is wrong. It's all over the place.
How about this one? Syracuse, syrup, Syria.
How about this one from the guy who lives there and says I was right?
Oh, that's bad. That's bad on mine.
Exactly. We need to move off this.
How would you pronounce it that way? That's like Adam, people calling it Worcester. You can't just make up pronunciations of towns and cities.
Listen, my friend, just understand that for the most part, you're like at a 70 to 80% wrong clip on your takes in general. So just default to thinking you're wrong most of the time, and it'll be a lot better.
Most people do. All right, Jacob, back to you. Oh, whoa.
Oh, you got a good one. I saw that good one coming at the end.
Went to Syracuse. Even the guy that lives there is wrong. Yeah, I'm going to text my cousin. She went to Syracuse.
Okay.
Yeah.
You let us know what she says.
Okay, I will.
10 carries for 107 yards in the fourth quarter for Sean Tucker.
Wow.
He had one carry in the first half. Yeah, I mean, I do think it's important to point out because a lot of. So it was 6 carries for Bucky to 1 for Tucker. Bucky had a 74% snap rate in the first half. Brian Thomas Jr. led the Jaguars in routes run. I want to double check that because sometimes the tracking data gets updated after my initial look, but
first time all year, right? That he did
that? Yep. No, it's still there. He had more routes than Gabe and Christian Kirk, which is the first time. He's been slowly working his way up. So I'm still really, really excited for him. Obviously, the drop touchdown was frustrating. I don't know what the heck was going on with Jacksonville in that game. They had like 4 drop touchdowns. Like
they were weird too. They're like the ones where the receiver lets it get all the way into his body and just like totally looks like he gaffed. But I don't know.
Tank Dell, need to bring that up. He led the way for Houston. Xavier Hutchinson really did nothing. He had 2 targets. Hutchinson only ran around on like half of the dropbacks. Stefon Diggs was used less in the slot as the Texans just used fewer 3 receiver sets in general. And so Diggs actually worked down the field a little bit more. And I think he could have had a bit. Yeah, he had 20 fantasy points. Still, Diggs did well. But that's just a really encouraging note for Tank Dell to see him get going a little bit. I want to get back and watch that film too because they haven't been using Dell down the field as much as I thought they would. Have you guys watched any of the Houston game?
I didn't get a chance to do Houston yet.
Yeah, this is the one game because I wanted to see who Christian Gonzalez was covering, and I wanted to see Drake Maye. So this was one game that I didn't.
Yeah, that's gonna be a good one. The only other thing is that Christian Watson came back and had a full role right away, 74% route participation. Obviously, Wicks got banged up, but only Romeo Doubs ran more routes than him. So that's good for people who drafted him.
He looked freaking good on that one touchdown, man. That's the Christian Watson I know and love.
Sorry, I sent me a voice note of how to pronounce
Syracuse.
I really think this is going to be in one of the 10 to 20% of the things that I'm going to get right because I just texted another friend. So we'll see. So far, I think I'm going to win this one. All right. Yeah, with Christian
you can win this one and I'll win the battle. And by the battle, I mean 6-2, 6-0 in tennis.
Okay, so you're good. Moving on because we.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, there's another thing I want to bring up. Something Dan said last week that there was a little bit of pushback on. So let me just go ahead and get that from my text messages. I got a text from a friend who's hopefully listening, and he said, out of the blue, he says, studies have shown that workers that gather up the shopping carts actually enjoy that part of their jobs. They get a break and fresh air. So it's actually good to leave your cart willy-nilly.
Oh my God. This guy's serious.
I think he was serious.
What studies? What studies
sense.
are you showing? Every single time I've returned the cart at the end, when I go to Trader Joe's, I get a thank you from the guy who's like a thank you, and it's like always like this thank you, like thank you, man, like a kind of like a sigh of relief, thank you, like thank you for like being one of the few. No, I'm not saying this in the sense of I'm a hero. I'm saying in the opposite sense of like, wow, this guy is like taking a deep sigh of relief. Thank you. Like, as in like most people won't do this kind of thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's like, oh, thank you. Like the rest of these people are just leaving it for me out there. So
yeah, most people won't, but damn Schneier will.
Not a hero.
The hero that we deserve, folks. Dan Schneider.
No, I'm not saying that, but I am saying that again. It's a sigh of relief of like, wow, you're one of the only. Like, too many people are not doing this type of thing, right? And like, yes, and there's no way these people are like enjoying running around the parking lot, bringing carts back to the thing. Like, that study is terrible.
I could see it. I mean, if I worked at the grocery store, I think, well, I mean, like 6 to 7, 8 months out of the year, maybe. Wintertime, no, I wouldn't.
Yeah, really? What about in the winter?
Yeah, I could see going outside, gathering up the carts, walking around. I could see that being a nice little respite. I could see that. All right, why don't we get into our 4 big topics? And Rachel has the first one. She says, why does Brandon Aiyuk hate me? I don't think Brandon Aiyuk is a top 50 wide receiver per game right now. He's coming off 2 catches for 37 yards on 4 targets at Seattle. And Brandon Aiyuk, you mentioned Christian Watson, Jacob. The Packers, the 49ers, Ravens to a degree, they're similar. In you've got guys who aren't going to get a lot of targets, but they're probably going to be very productive with the targets. Aiyuk is basically on pace for the same amount of targets he was on pace for last year, if you just look at his healthy games. But he's doing nothing with it. He is catching 56.1% of his targets, which is super low. So, it's like last year he was so efficient. I didn't draft Brandon Aiyuk in any leagues, but the holdout had a lot to do with that. I just thought this was going to be kind of a disaster year for him. I think you could definitely make the case to buy low. It's very important to note he is getting the same amount of targets per game, although it's a little deceiving because he had 10 in one game without Debo and Kittle. So maybe I shouldn't be saying that because really without that game, the targets are a little bit low, but the efficiency is ridiculously low. Aiyuk is a better player than this. Anyway, why does Brandon Aiyuk hate his fantasy managers, Jacob?
The targets are low. Other than his second season when Shanahan hated Aiyuk, this is the worst season of his career in terms of target per route run rate. The first read target rate is down as well. I keep thinking that he's going to pick it up, obviously because he's such a good player, but also because Brock Purdy is, to me, seems to be looking down the field more than we've ever seen. And so like that just feels intuitively like it's going to lead to more looks for Aiyuk. But I guess maybe not if Juwan Jennings just keeps winning all the time down the field too. I think he'll pick it up, but yeah, he hates me too. I've got a dynasty team that I'm bailing on this week because I made a big trade for Aiyuk and Calvin Ridley, and that did not go well.
I'll add something here. I think one, we can lean back to what something Jacob mentioned earlier about these receivers who held out of camp, weren't in good shape. Like, but I remember reading a story when Aiyuk returned to camp, like he's not running wind sprints. Like he's not in the shape yet. So maybe he needs to still round himself out into form. I don't feel like he looks bad on these routes. I think a bigger factor could be something we haven't considered, which is this offense looks entirely different without Christian McCaffrey, right? Like the way defenses are playing the Niners is totally different because Mason is not doing what McCaffrey can in the pass game. He's not the threat that McCaffrey is in the pass game. They don't have to respect him that way. So that opens up a little bit. That doesn't open up a little bit of the middle of the field type stuff that was working, those deep crossers, which has been Aiyuk's game since he got to the Niners. So that's one thing that could get better because McCaffrey is supposed to return at some point in quote unquote early November. We'll see what ends up happening there and when that actually does happen. But there is some optimism on that front.
The separation scores and stuff like that do look good for Aiyuk still. I do think he's getting open.
Yeah. But I thought about that. Like you talking about a guy who has his worst target per route run rate, is second worst of his career. And the 49ers are 31st in running back target rate.
Right.
So
that's it.
While you get the benefit of McCaffrey drawing coverage, if you go back and you watch, you probably watched it, but the Deebo Samuel 76-yard touchdown, I think it was, Brandon Aiyuk drew 3 defenders in the middle of the field. And that was happening a lot, not necessarily 3 defenders, but deep crossers, right? He's drawn a lot of double coverage in the middle of the field and really opening things up against Seattle for other players. But yeah, so what happens with McCaffrey? Did things get opened up for Aiyuk? Or do we have now they're going to start throwing the ball 5 times a game to Christian McCaffrey, and this is terrible.
I think it's good, though. Even if you lose those 5 times a game, just the attention that he takes away and the way that defenses have to scheme to play the offense versus when he's on the field versus when he's not. I just think it opens up so much more space. I think it's basically what's that whole pass game is predicated on. Though they haven't been bad. Like Jacob has said, like Birdie's been awesome this year behind the curtain. Like if you look at the tape and if you look at the numbers, he's been awesome, but I just think that offense can be even better with McCaffrey on the field, and there will be more space for Aiyuk and Deebo, but mostly Aiyuk.
I think Jauan Jennings really is affecting things. Like
that too. Yeah, that's fair.
He's been playing out of his mind. His target per run rate, even when Aiyuk, this is only on plays that he shared the field with Aiyuk, is 23%, which is much higher than Aiyuk's and is way, way higher than it's ever been in Jauan Jennings' past. Last year was 14%.
Yeah, now here's the thing. So there was the one game where Deebo and Kittle didn't play, and Aiyuk had 11 catches, 175 yards, and 3 touchdowns on 12 targets. But even in the next 3 games, when everybody's been back, 6, 4, 5 targets for Jauan Jennings. That's a problem. I mean, you'd rather that be 2 targets, that we'd like. It's not that it makes Jennings relevant. It really doesn't, but it definitely hurts the other guys. And then I wonder, the other part of this is, all right, we buy low on Aiyuk. Let me just give you some like Aiyuk, or would you rather have Aiyuk or George Pickens?
Aiyuk.
Brian Thomas Jr. or Aiyuk?
Ooh.
BTJ.
I'm going to say Aiyuk with the hope that McCaffrey will help when he gets back.
What about Deebo Samuel and George Kittle? George Kittle is the number 1 tight end in fantasy, and he is blowing everyone out. He is 3.5 points better than number 2 per game. Number 2, Brock Bowers in PPR. He has 5 touchdowns, and it just doesn't feel sustainable. And then the touchdown rate anyway. Deebo, he's got 3 straight games with 5 or fewer targets, I believe, after having like 19 targets combined in his first 2 games. And he is getting some rushing work, but I don't know that I don't really want to give away players on the 49ers. That's they're just going to be better per target than most.
Let's say this. I agree with you on that. I'm like just thinking about this, and I don't have the stats in front of me. Maybe Jacob has them. He's never going to have them in front of him. This was a ridiculous ask by me. So this won't be the case. But with McCaffrey off the field from a schematic standpoint, don't you feel like they're hitting on so many fewer explosive plays? I know they hit the one Deebo one last week. But don't you feel like there's just so many fewer explosive plays in this offense in general? I'm not saying they're not as efficient. They're not making some of these 17 to 20-yard throws. But they're just it just feels to me like this offense has lost an explosive element because McCaffrey was, A, making explosive plays, but just B, grabbing so much attention from opposing defensive coordinators. I don't know, though. That's how I feel.
I don't know that I agree. They have a much higher ADOT. Are they first in ADOT this year?
But how about just 40-plus plays?
Yeah, so let's get the explosive play rate. I think we can find that.
And I'm talking 40-plus, not the 20-plus.
All right, I'll just look explosive. I mean, that might be true. Explosive per dropback, they're 4th. So that would be what is that in True Media, Jacob? That is a 17-yard pass?
Yeah, I think it's 16 or higher, so it's not what Dan's looking for.
Okay. Well, they are 4th best in explosive per dropback. They were number 1 in explosive per dropback last year.
2nd in ADOT. Anthony Richardson's always going to be 1st.
Yeah. I feel I know what you guys are saying.
I'm going to do 30 yards. I'm going to do 30-yard completions, okay? Last year,
I'm not even really referring to that. I'm talking about the touchdowns, like those big play touchdowns they had last year. And I know we can't really find the stats for that. It just feels to me like last year watching the 49ers, there were tons of plays week in, week out where Purdy would hit McCaffrey or Purdy would hit Aiyuk or Deebo on these huge plays. Some of them that went for touchdowns. I just don't feel like I've seen that as much from this offense.
That might be, but they were first in the NFL in 30-plus yard completions last year with 32 in 17 games.
Okay.
They're 2nd in the NFL this year with 11 30-plus completions. in 6 games. So it almost feels like they're playing really well. You may not know it. Their numbers are so good. It almost feels like it could be even better to me anyway. But I guess my final thought is like, would you try to sell Deebo Samuel or George Kittle, or just keep them?
I'm just keeping on both. Right. I mean, Kittle's one I would consider selling, but I don't know what you can really do because you're going to need a tight end, right? Like,
yeah. If you could turn Kittle into Brock Bowers and something else, I would do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, maybe.
All right, let's take a break. And when we come back, we'll talk about the Cowboys. Dan, I'm going to let Dan. He's probably fired up. I'll let Dan talk about the Cowboys first when we come back on FFT.
If you love football, this is the best time of the year.
This is as big as it gets. The stuff of absolute dreams.
Dan still wears the pajamas with feet attached. No, I think you're probably looking at Dan's pajamas right now.
That's not true. I told you I sleep in the nude.
Oh, jeez. Well, then you're definitely not looking at that. All right, let's get to our second big topic here. Is from Berlin. The Cowboys improve enough after the bye to consider them buy lows in fantasy. What do you think, Dan Schneier?
So it's really interesting, Adam. While I discuss this, I would like, if you can possibly, to get up their schedule because I'm curious how that looks rest of the season. We went over Eagles, who have a really good opportunity schedule based. I'm curious to see what the Cowboys see.
Pretty good, I think. It's San Francisco on the road. So you have to get, I think, a little bit out. But at San Francisco, at Atlanta. Then it's Philadelphia, Houston, at Washington, Giants, Cincinnati, at Carolina, Tampa Bay, at Philadelphia, Washington again in week 18. Gets better as we go. But
I think there's only 2 or 3 in there that sounded good.
The fantasy playoff stretch run is pretty good. They're one of the 6 defenses I highlighted for the last
quarter. Get Washington in fantasy play. What is the fantasy playoffs? Because we don't need to count the week 18.
Right.
Carolina, Tampa Bay, Philadelphia.
Okay, Carolina's in there. Yeah. Which is good.
Away from it. Let's put it that way. I'm not running away from the schedule.
I'm not running away from that schedule either. I also don't think that that's an amazing schedule, but I will say this about their offense and them being a potential buy now. Look, when my concern with the Cowboys going into last year was Mike McCarthy's offense, similar to what we've seen from Nathaniel Hackett this year and Aaron Rodgers, is really not with the times, right? He doesn't use a lot of pre-snap motion. He doesn't do a lot of the things that Jacob refers to in the newsletter and other places as cheat codes for NFL offense. Now, some might say, look, you zig while there's zag, and the offense did work last year, zigging while there's zag. Dak Prescott was playing really good football last year. He works through his reads, works through his regressions, and processes defense faster than most quarterbacks. This year, it hasn't worked as well. Part of the issue is the offensive line. They've made their investments, but this offensive line has been banged up, and they haven't been. What are you laughing at, Jacob? A comment?
Yeah.
Okay, we can get to that in a moment. Dan pulls his pants all the way down when he pees. That's hilarious.
So weird.
It is weird, but funny. The weirder comment came too after that.
That one I'm not reading this.
So look, when the offensive line is not protecting as well as it has in the past because of injuries and because of just losing guys like Tyrone Smith, among others, and Zach Martin getting older and playing hurt, it's not going to work as well in a Mike McCarthy offense. We're seeing this with the Jets and Nathaniel Hackett this year. When your offense doesn't use pre-snap motion, doesn't use the cheat codes, and is relying on one-on-one matchups to win, you need to have pass protection. You need to have confidence in the offensive line. And I don't see that with the Cowboys right now. I thought Detroit had an amazing game plan to stop this type of Cowboys Mike McCarthy offense. I don't know that every team's going to be able to do it because I don't think every team has the personnel or the wherewithal for a defensive coordinator to change his scheme or operate change what his game plan is for one specific opponent. I don't see that a lot in the NFL. Some coordinators do it, most don't. So I still think we're going to be fine on this front. Buy low, though, I wouldn't call this a buy low. I think this offense looks pretty broken to me, just from a schematic standpoint. And they're going to rely again on guys like Dak and CD to pull them through, which isn't happening as much this year. They can't run the football, too. That's another huge problem with the Cowboys.
That's a big problem.
The past, they've been able to run the football. They can't run the football at all.
They ran the ball pretty well at Pittsburgh 2 weeks ago. Very well. And then they just couldn't run the ball in this game because they got behind so big so early. And Detroit also has a great run defense. I hated how much Zeke was on the field, when the game mattered. I hated that. I read an article that he was a little disappointed with his role. Well, honestly, he's just not getting it done. So please give Dowdle more touches. Not that he's the answer, but there are going to be better touches than Zeke. I would buy low because I don't see how it can get any worse, honestly. CeeDee Lamb is like something like wide receiver 15 per game in non-PPR, 12 per game in full PPR. I just can't even see a scenario where he is that bad rest of season. Look, they were pretty disappointing at this point last year, and then they had basically the best offense in football it was like a week earlier. I think it was 5 bad games, and then in week 6 they got things turned around. But they did get things turned around. They were missing their left tackle. Mike McCarthy talked about that. Tyler Guyton did not play yesterday, and he basically put a lot of the blame on the offensive line. He was asked about Dak. He said he was under pressure all day. He was asked about the lack of a running game. He put it on the offensive line, said, well, we really weren't opening up holes for those guys. So hopefully if Tyler Guyton, their left tackle, comes back after the bye, I'm almost certain that he will, and they play better there. But I would buy low because I just this is only on Dak and Lamb and Ferguson too. I just don't see how Lamb could not be a top 6 wide receiver and how Dak's not going to be, a start-worthy quarterback going forward personally. But even if there are problems on the offense, it can't be this bad, in my opinion. Jacob?
Agreed. You guys nailed it.
Okay. All right. And then it's a good time to buy low because they're going to a bye. And I think that's the CeeDee Lamb. Like, it's going to be tough to prize CeeDee Lamb away because the CeeDee Lamb manager's going, I don't want to give away this guy and then see him go off and like it's going to eat at you. And you're going to remember last year that Dak Prescott would be a sneakier buy low. Because
I think Dak Prescott's sneakier buy low. I think Jalen Tolbert's a sneakier buy low. I know it didn't happen yesterday for him, but it happened 2 weeks ago for him. And I liked what I got a chance to watch his tape from 2 weeks ago in Pittsburgh. And I really liked what I saw.
What do you think about trying to turn Jaden Reed plus into CeeDee Lamb or Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson or something like that?
It's so interesting because what, Adam?
What? Like, what are we doing? Jaden Reed? And so we'd rather have.
I don't want to trade Jaden Reed, Jacob.
Right.
I am like, this guy's just going to.
I'm just trying to think of somebody who you realistically could get Lamb for, and I think it's him. Someone like that.
I mean, it's not unrealistic. I think Jaden Reed is such a phenomenal player, and at times I've undersold him. I tried to trade him in Dynasty this past offseason, and now it's like not even on my radar because I'm like, wow, I'm just going to stick with this guy with Jordan Love. But the problem with trading Jordan Love or Reed, I think, is that you're trading away a wide receiver who's really talented, and I honestly think might be playing in the. Let's think about how I should say this. Is it one of the most wide receiver friendly offenses in the NFL?
Yeah.
Right?
In a sense, but at the same time, he has 21 fewer targets.
It's not a target-based thing with Reed.
You can't keep that up.
Can you? We said that last year. It's why we were so low ranked. That's why I ranked him so low, and I regret it.
Take a look at Aiyuk. It's just like you can't. And by the way, he only has one more carry than CeeDee Lamb. Lamb has 8. Right. Reed has 9, except Reed's 9 carries have gone for 110 yards and a touchdown. Lamb's 8 carries have gone for 37 yards and no touchdowns.
Right.
So I would definitely do it. I think CeeDee Lamb is clearly ahead of Reed. Can I bring up one more name?
Sure.
I don't think we've got time here.
Yeah.
Chris Godwin. I'm really curious where you place him among these elite guys because I think you can make a case that he's as good as anyone for fantasy. His fantasy point per route run number is 3rd in the NFL. And part of that is that he has 5 touchdowns already this year, which is the same amount of touchdowns he had in the past 2 years combined.
Yeah.
But fantasy points per route run, you've got AJ Brown, then Nico Collins, then Justin Jefferson, then Chris Godwin, above Neighbors, above Jaden Reed, above Jamar Chase, Amon St. Brown, Drake London. So part of that's touchdowns, but also his target rate is way higher than it's ever been. 27% target per route run rate. And then his first down per route run rate, which we had Ryan Heath on last week for fantasy points. He told us about how that stat correlates more strongly with future fantasy point production than even yards per route run. Godwin's been between 9.2 and 10.7% every year of his career. This year he's at 15%. Wow. It's massive. It's, I think, 2nd in the NFL. And so, on paper, he looks like one of the best receivers, one of the best fantasy players out there. And I think he just looks amazing on the field.
Yeah.
I was going to say, eye test wise, pass for Chris Godwin. This is the best I've seen him look since before the injury. Some of these touchdowns he's had have been post-catch, yards after the catch, explosive runs after the catch from him that like you didn't expect or see if you watched his tape last year. And that's 1 year removed. Now he's more than 1 year removed from the ACL. A lot of people talk about this. It affects different athletes different ways. Obviously, Breece Hall still was pretty explosive last year after it, and somehow is not doing anything this year, which I blame the Jets O-line for. But Godwin clearly looks like a different player, and I think that's the case. The case to be made now is like, where do we put Godwin in all this? Because the Bucs offense under Liam Cohen is one of the most fun offenses to watch from a schematic standpoint on tape. Liam Cohen is doing an insane job as an offensive coordinator. Baker Mayfield throws for like 350 to 400 on a weekly basis at this point. Yes. So Godwin is the key cog in that, as Jacob just broke down. I know Evans is still there, but if Evans is a little banged up, playing a little hurt, this could be big for like Godwin could be creeping into like, what is he like? Where would we rank him?
He's 5th in points per game right now, ahead of Jamar Chase.
That's why I brought it up.
Will come down with touchdowns. Yeah, sorry,
I think he's one of the guys who you could pry away CeeDee Lamb from somebody with, but I don't even know if that's the right move. Like I think you could push him as high as 1, basically. Like
if Evans is a little hurt,
but if Evans is hurt, maybe.
Look, Godwin was a phenomenal talent before the injury, and he looks kind of back to what he was, right?
Yeah, and they're playing him in the slot more. And he also said that he wasn't fully healthy even last year.
Right.
Because like, obviously in 2022, he was coming off the ACL injury, so we didn't expect him to be healthy. But he even said in 2023 he wasn't really back to normal.
And it looked that way.
Yeah, okay. So he's awesome. And then I think that brings us into our next topic. Our third big topic is the Bucs running back situation. Fat Pete, with a PH, Fat Pete says the Bucs running back situation. What's happening here? Is White just on the trade bubble and being kept healthy? That seems like a little bit of a conspiracy theory to me, but maybe. But yeah, I mean, this is where I'd start, Jacob. Does the Bucs rushing success, because it's going to get better if they stop giving the ball to Rachaad White. I'm sorry to say it. He's just not as good as Bucky Irving. I think I feel comfortable saying that. Is that going to hurt Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin? Is that going to hurt the passing attack?
Possibly. We've seen Cohen be somebody who will lean on the run at times. And he's, spent time with McVay, who likes to play that way. I don't think it's I think you can say confidently that it would be better without Rachaad White. Rachaad White's been a less effective runner than Leonard Fournette and Chase Edmonds the past 2 seasons when sharing the backfield of those guys.
Right.
I think it could lead to more running, but also Tampa Bay, I think, just gets in a lot of shootouts and really does like to pass. So I don't think it's like, I think
here's what concerns me. They have the most touchdown passes from 5-yard line or closer.
Yeah.
And that is like, they have not had a good running back near the goal line. So I always joke Mike Evans is their goal line back. And the Bengals, by the way, are second with 6 touchdowns here. But yeah, like it could lead to fewer touchdowns. It really could. Bengals, by the way, are just crushing the field in pass attempts from inside the 5-yard line with 16. Bucs are second with 11.
Bucky's the guy you want. I think no matter what direction it goes, he's going to be really important for this team.
I don't think there's any conspiracy theory to trade Rachaad White. It doesn't make any real sense because, one, NFL teams don't really give up any assets for running backs. 2, Rachaad White is on a rookie contract, and it's, they don't have to, it's a great team-friendly deal. But at the same time, Sean Tucker looked really good, and Bucky Irving was responded to handling some of the responsibilities that Rachaad White had previously, handled. I still think he's probably their best option in the passing game and on passing downs, White. So maybe they just look at it like we can run a 3-back system. But I don't foresee Sean Tucker going fully back to the bench after this one. And I think he'll get himself a few touches a game, which is going to further complicate things in this backfield.
Let's see. Rachaad White. No, I'm not going to give this stat because it's just wrong. I was going to say they both had 30-yard runs, Tucker and Irving in yesterday's game, and I wanted to see what Rachaad White's career long was, but he actually had a 56-yard run 2 weeks ago. We all remember was his best run of his career, but still 3.7 yards per carry on 452 carries in his career. So you say Irving is the one to get. I would agree. I wonder though, like when Rachaad White is back, I just don't know that passing downs work is going to be there from Bucky Irving. He might be a 1 to 2 catch guy. But
He was really good in that regard in college.
Yeah.
he was. But I got to give Rashad White credit there. He's not a good rusher, but he's pretty good in the passing game.
Yeah.
All right. This offense is humming, and good for them.
Right.
And
That's the key.
Baltimore shootout against Baltimore next week. Hopefully, that's a big game. All right, and then our last topic: the best players with the best playoff schedules. Or I just did players with the best playoff schedules.
This question's from Shaq, right?
This question is from Shaq.
That's cool.
Did you see him photo bombing or interview bombing on the sideline on Saturday?
No, I missed that.
Yeah, he was like, they were doing a sideline report on the LSU sideline, and he was just like in the background, like, hey. Shaq. Did you guys see the trick play that Penn State ran with their tight end? Their tight ends became the center, snapped the ball. I missed the explanation for why it was legal. So they line shifts. He becomes the center, but he's practically on the end of the line of scrimmage. I mean, there must have been somebody out wide. No, because he couldn't have been covered, right? If he had been covered, he wouldn't have been eligible to go out. So he snaps the ball, and then he just like runs a deep pattern and catches a touchdown. It was incredible.
Amazing catch.
Yeah, I missed the explanation on why it was legal, though. I really would like to find out. I'm fascinated by that play. Anyway, I did some research on this. Did you guys look into best playoff schedules?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Jacob. What do you got? Hopefully we have some overlap.
Ketchup and syrup on eggs?
Oh, yeah. There's been some takes in the chat right now.
What is going on in the chat?
So first of all, let me make some things clear. Somebody said Dan's the type of person who uses ketchup on his scrambled eggs. No, let me make it clear. Ketchup is the most overrated condiment in the game. Really just trash. I like it on fries and potatoes only. Burgers, I will accept it on, but a good burger should never need ketchup. It's just a sugar trash product loaded with disgusting amounts of corn syrup. As far as eggs go, another strong take coming from me. Scrambled is the worst way to eat eggs. I don't like my eggs when they're scrambled. I find them kind of dry. I find them kind of hard to, you got to chew a lot. You got to get them down. Taste isn't great. Yeah, it's true.
You scrambled eggs.
You can have fluffy version. It's still not good. You don't have to chew a lot, but in general, it's just not a good bite. Now, the way to eat eggs by far is fried, because you cut into them, you let the yolk run out, and now you got the egg juice. You soak up each bite with that egg juice. That's what makes it taste good.
Gross.
So, no, that's what makes it taste good.
They call it yolk.
A great take here from Johnny Vang is sriracha on eggs. Yes, that's acceptable. Hold the disgusting corn syrup, sugar ketchup, and put sriracha on.
Yeah, I mean, I mostly agree with ketchup. I put ketchup on things that I'm not enjoying. It's like,
it's a great way to say it. Besides fries, they're great with fries.
Yeah, I mean, they are great with fries. Like, oh, I'm not enjoying this sandwich. Like, I made a turkey burger a few weeks ago and it was horrible. I was like, I'm just gonna put ketchup on it. And
God, a turkey burger.
Yeah, it was horrible. Did
you baked it too?
No, I don't know if it was.
Can you imagine anything drier and more disgusting than a baked turkey burger?
It was bad. But I don't do this anymore. But when I was a kid, and this is so good, and I don't understand why everyone is repulsed by it. And I've said it on the show before, so you might know it. Eggs with strawberry jam or jelly.
Whoa.
Eggs and jelly.
I'm not repulsed. I'm almost in some ways intrigued by this.
It goes in with every bread, right? You put it on your toast. I don't know why if you could put ketchup on eggs, why wouldn't you put like a better sweetener on eggs? Like eggs and jelly is delicious. It's delicious.
Intrigued by this. I'm very intrigued by this. I don't think I'll try it, but if somebody handed it to me, I would eat it.
All right. Late season schedules.
What was this? You said they call it yolk. What was?
Oh yeah, he was calling it egg juice.
Yeah, no, it's egg juice. Yeah, that's egg juice. I refer to it as egg juice. The runny egg juice. Yes.
Okay, let's get.
That's what it's used as. You soak it up with it. Listen, that's the best way to eat eggs. I stand by it.
I do. Yeah, I agree, but I just don't call it.
You just don't like to call it egg juice. Respect.
All right. Jacob.
The Saints, who knows what's going to happen with Derek Carr, but like this is probably the absolute cheapest Olave is ever going to be. They have a bye week in week 12, and then they get the Rams, and then the Giants, not a great matchup, and then their fantasy playoff schedule is Washington at Green Bay, potential shootout there, and then the Raiders. No, I don't, those aren't amazing matches. Washington is, the Rams are. So I do think things will be better for them in the second half, and it's been kind of a tough go for Olave here, so I think that's interesting. I still believe in him as a player.
Olave, yeah.
They
call it yolk is legendary. That was a great line.
It's an all-time liner for Beyond the Box Score right there by Jacob Gibbs.
if
Atlanta.
you're Olave, though, you should be prepared to have him suck for 3 weeks. Like I don't know if he's even going to play this week.
Yeah.
And he could be good with Rattler. I'm not saying he won't be, but you got to be prepared for him to be bad with Rattler. Go ahead.
I felt like they completely adjusted to Rattler in the second half of that game. I'm a little bit worried as we move forward with Rat.
Yeah. If you're a team that can afford to wait, if you feel like you're good, you're like in the top 2 or 3 of your league, like I think that makes sense to go get Olave. For the Falcons, the buy window on Drake London is closed.
Oh yeah.
But maybe Mooney after kind of a down game. I thought it made sense for Mooney to have a quiet game in this matchup. The Panthers run a ton of cover 3, and that's been a coverage he hasn't done well against typically. But some potential shootouts these next 3 weeks, and then after their Week 12 bye, they got a couple gross matchups, but then they have the Raiders, Giants, and then Commanders. Commanders in the Fantasy Championship week is just really, really exciting. That might be like a top 20 spot for Darnell Mooney or whatever.
I had Cousins on my list. Yeah.
Yeah, Cousins too. That makes sense. I hope you bought Bijan if you could.
You sell on Bijan? Because Dave was kind of making the case that this is the time to obviously to sell super high, but this is the peak of his value.
I guess if you can sell him at like the 101, 102 where he was drafted this year, then yeah.
Would you sell him for CeeDee Lamb?
Sure, if it makes sense. Position, I think, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Got the depth at running back for sure.
All right, go ahead, Jacob.
Dallas, we already hit on, but I do like their playoff schedule. The Jets, I don't know who this note is really going to be useful for. I guess Garrett Wilson. But they have starting in week 10, they have the Cardinals and then they have the Colts. It's just been like Garrett Wilson has faced the toughest cornerbacks possible, and then at the second half of the season he gets his reprieve. Bye week in week 12. Seahawks, potential shootout week 13, Dolphins week 14, Jaguars week 15, Rams week 16. That's amazing. That's about as good as it gets.
It's incredible. And then Buffalo is giving up the second most fantasy points to running backs. I think it's even better schedule for Breece Hall.
Love it.
Highlight. And then the only thing with Garrett Wilson is the whole Devontae Adams thing. That's just got to factor that in. But
I think that might help. You're not going to see 22 targets or whatever, but I think it might help to have somebody else that defenses have to worry about. This next one, I really don't know who it's going to apply to. These next two are the Browns and the Broncos. You hate when terrible teams have the good matchups at the end of the year, but that's kind of what we've got. They
just had the Commanders and the Eagles, the Browns, and they were horrible, and I'm just done. I'm done.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll be Jameis by then.
It's totally fair. If it's Jameis at the end of the year, they've got Cincinnati and Miami in week 16 and 17.
If it's Jameis by the end of the year, we might be talking about weird things like Jerry Jeudy being on the fantasy radar, waiver wire radar.
I feel like
Miami's been horrible against the run, but they've been really good against the pass this year. I do want to point that out. I think second best against quarterbacks or something, which is probably a little bit of matchups, but not exclusively.
They've gotten crazy pressure. I've been really shocked at how high they keep appearing on pass rush win rates and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The Broncos have a week 14 bye. There's so many week 14 buys. It feels like. And then the Colts, Chargers, and Bengals to close things out. Anytime I can find a matchup against the Colts, I'm taking that.
Yeah, right. They're great. And the Jaguars, which brings me to Tony Pollard, who faces both of those teams 3 times actually in his last 4 games. He goes Jaguars in week 14, Bengals, who honestly got healthier at defensive tackle. Maybe they're not going to be a layup.
They looked better last night.
It was tough. It was tough for Tracy. 10 yards before contact last night for Tracy.
10 what was that?
10 yards before contact on 17 rushes or whatever.
Wow.
So Tony Pollard has an amazing schedule beginning in week 14, and we're not including week 18, just for everyone's benefit here. Jacksonville, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Jacksonville for Pollard. Breece Hall, I think, has the best running back schedule just in the last 4 weeks of the season. James Conner would be right up there too. New England, Carolina, and the Rams. They're 27th, 32nd, and 25th against running backs. James Conner's playoff schedule is great, and the Bucs running backs, to continue that theme, their last 5 games are Panthers, Raiders, Chargers, who have been very good against running backs, Cowboys, Panthers. So in their last 5 games, they get the Panthers twice, Tampa Bay, which is also good for everyone on the team. And they get Dallas and the Raiders. Those teams have been horrible against running backs. The quarterbacks I wanted to highlight were Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott, Carolina, Tampa Bay, Philadelphia in the playoffs, and Justin Fields. Philadelphia. Now, Philadelphia is 17th against quarterbacks. I don't really buy it. I think they're a good matchup. So Justin Fields has Philadelphia, Baltimore. They're horrible against the pass. And then Kansas City, which is a bad matchup in week 17. Wide receiver, I love Deontay Johnson's playoff schedule. I like George Pickens' playoff schedule, except week 17. And I am very worried about Andrew Thomas missing time. I think it's a huge deal. But Malik Neighbors on paper, it'd be hard to find a lot of wide receivers who have a better schedule going forward from this point on. I mentioned this earlier. 8 of his last 10 opponents ranked 21st or worse against opposing wide receivers. That is Malik Neighbors. And he gets the Colts in week 17. So that rocks. And teams with bad schedules in the playoffs, the Colts, Denver, Tennessee, and the Giants. 2 of those 3 games are on the road. The Jaguars get Tennessee in week 14. Then they get the Jets, at the Raiders, and Tennessee. Kansas City is at Cleveland. This one's interesting because at Cleveland, then Houston. Those defenses have been very disappointing. But at Cleveland, Houston, and at Pittsburgh. And then Miami's got a tough schedule. Jets in week 14. And then their playoff matchups are, again, teams that are good on paper but haven't been great. At Houston, San Francisco, at Cleveland. Honestly, I don't know if it really matters for the Dolphins. Those matchups look worse on paper than they actually have been IRL. So that's it for me. But yeah, I mean, I want to highlight those running backs again. Breece Hall, James Conner, Tampa Bay's running backs, and Tony Pollard. Phenomenal schedules late in the season. All right.
And Tony Pollard might benefit from. I'm sorry, what did you say, Jacob?
I said when you say James Conner, you mean Trey Benson?
Yeah, well, that
I don't know. That was an interesting development, but Connor's been so good for
he
a
was
year.
Banged up a little too in this game,
Yeah,
Connor.
exactly.
Loosening up on the side. I think he'll be fine, but I think the Pollard one's really interesting to me because it could also, that easy schedule in the playoffs could also impact DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley if, and only if, and I think they will, the Titans make the decision to bench Will Levis by then. Mason Rudolph, not a great NFL quarterback, but we watched Mason Rudolph keep an offense somewhat on schedule last year with Pittsburgh with a lot worse offensive line situation, a lot worse weapons there than what the Titans have. Mason Rudolph can keep this passing game and offense somewhat on schedule. Will Levis cannot keep it even remotely on schedule. He's one of the worst quarterbacks I've ever seen a team trot out for this amount of time.
You're very high on him in college, though.
No, you're kidding.
Yeah.
Good one.
I just wanted to see if I could get steam to come out of Dan's ears.
It was appalled.
Yeah.
I mean, I never understood. Like, anyone who watched Levis in college and was like, this guy's got arm talent. I'm like, what? What are you watching? Like, yeah, he has good velocity, but arm talent is the ability to change trajectory. Arm talent is the ability to anticipate, to throw on time, ball placement, touch. Like, these are things he never had.
You know what's funny? How did you feel? We'll wrap it up on this. How did you feel about Will Levis when he made his, because you had been like,
his debut.
His debut. You had been
unreal
since the draft. You did not like Will Levis. He went 19 of 29 for 238 yards and 4 touchdowns. He scored 34.6 fantasy points in his debut. What were you thinking at that moment?
I was thinking I was going to have to eat a lot of crow on Will Levis, and I just got it wrong. But not really. I mean, the reality of the situation is a lot of quarterbacks have good debuts. Daniel Jones, remember him versus Tampa Bay? Unbelievable debut. It's teams don't have any tape on them, right?
Drake Maye.
I hope that's not the case with him. But teams don't have any tape on these guys. They don't know how to adjust. And then they figure out the concepts they like to run, the concepts they can run. They take those away, and it's on the quarterback to adjust. Obviously, that's not something Will Levis can do. I can't imagine the Titans will keep playing him all year. It's different than most situations because the Titans didn't invest a first-round pick in him. They only used a second-round pick. So I think they're going to be more willing to bench him at some point. And eventually, the locker room's going to get to a point. I think I saw – did you see the Calvin Ridley stat yesterday, Jacob? It was like what was that stat?
Like, do you mean that he had 5 of his 8 targets in the fourth quarter, or that he had over 100 air yards and no receiving yards?
100 air yards and no receiving yards. That one.
Gosh, wild. All right. Well, I just put up a Twitter poll. I should have done it earlier. How do you pronounce Syracuse? A, like syrup, or B, SERR, accuse? And we'll see who wins. So far, the 2 people I reached out to who went to Syracuse both said syrup, so
I'm willing to admit I might lose this one to the public, but it just goes back to a lot of things I pronounce. It's a New York, Jersey style accent, pronunciation of a lot of words.
Unlike you, I was actually born in New York, so don't tell me how to pronounce things.
You lived most of your life in Florida.
Yeah, but my mom still has a New York accent. So
I like how I pronounce Florida. A lot of people get mad at that one too.
I think I say it that way, Florida.
Florida. It's basically, I basically pronounce it FLAR. like an idiot. But
oh, you say Florida? Yeah, I don't like that. All right, we got to go, everybody. Thanks for watching Beyond the Box Score. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you tomorrow with the waiver wire on Fantasy Football Today.